Welcome to the Prison Pod, a podcast for all people experiencing incarceration. The mission of this podcast is to save lives, restore hope, reduce suffering, and recidivism. Many show ideas come directly from the listeners, so please write the host. Prison Pod, Post Office Box 294, Orono, Maine, 04473. Here is your host, Ms. Valerie.
Well, hello again. Welcome to the Prison Pod. We are coming up towards the end of season 4. I think we have 5 more recordings after this one. And today's guest is Jackie Hallberg, and she is a powerful voice within the criminal justice reform. But I found out about Jackie because she is a traveler, and I have fear of traveling. I fear traveling by myself. I spend a month to go away for a weekend. So when I first started seeing Jackie, I was seeing she was taking these trips all over the place by herself, and she seemed a little nervous at first, but then she just seemed like to be such a pro. So I'm going to do things backwards, and I'm going to ask you about that a little bit first. But first of all, I want to welcome you today, Jackie.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
So as I mentioned, I have been following your travels, and I'd like to know how you decided to do that first trip alone.
So I remember the first time that I thought about traveling by myself. I was sitting there watching TV. I was watching way too much TV, and I'm like, the rest of my life cannot be all about watching TV. I had recently been divorced. A lot of my friends had partners or little kids, or they didn't have vacation time, so they couldn't travel with me. And I grew up and lived in Michigan my whole life, but not only Michigan, I've always lived in the same county of Michigan my whole life. So I didn't travel a lot when I was younger. And I decided, you know what? We're just going to do it. We're going to take a trip somewhere. And I booked my first trip to Arizona, and you're right, I was excited about it, but I was terrified as well. I was more terrified of the idea of keeping myself company for a whole week by myself, going out to dinner by myself. I had never done that before. And once I did that, the first time, I'm like, that's kind of cool. You don't have to hear other people's cell phone going off at night. You don't have to do what they want to do. You can sleep in or get up early. You can do whatever you want to do when you're traveling. And oh my gosh, Valerie, I got so many people saying some of the same stuff you said. Oh, I don't want to travel alone. I can't imagine going away. I don't even like to be on an airplane, let alone trying to find my luggage by myself, or trying to know if it's a safe area, or if I, have enough money or anything like that. And it's like, when you're doing it for yourself, you get to make all those adjustments. If you don't have enough money, then you don't go out to dinner. You go to the McDonald's and buy something off the dollar menu. You go to the Walmart and you buy your granola bar or something. So I am very frugal when I travel. I don't spend a lot of money. I try to go when there's not as many tourists and it's not as expensive. And I try to do things that feel good for me, because too many times, especially when you start talking about my work, it's intense, difficult, stressful stuff. And it's like when I travel, I get to see beautiful things and I get to be happy.
That's great. So you first started traveling for fun, but now I'm going to back things up and go into you're doing a lot of traveling for your work. So can we talk a little bit about where you're going now and what you are doing for work?
So I've traveled for work conferences for a long time. There's been some different years that there's not a lot, but when you travel for a work conference or a work meeting, it's totally different than traveling for vacation by yourself. Now, I always encourage people to bundle them together, because you may get sent someplace that you never thought about going on a vacation, and you get there for a work event or you have to speak for a little bit, and all of a sudden you're like, this place is beautiful. It's better than I thought it was. So I always try to pair them if you can. I am open for a lot of places right now, Valerie. My schedule is way lighter than it usually is for traveling, whether for work or for fun. So 2025, if you need a speaker, if you need some person to come in and help do some consulting, you want to talk to me soon before I start getting too booked. Right now I have only one trip 100% to Missouri planned for the year, so I need to do some more stuff. So I like to do cruises. international. I've been to all 50 states, so there's a lot of states I need to get back to and do other things to it. I've driven around Canada all the way around Lake Superior by myself. And out of the 50 states, I've done 26 of those states by myself.
That's amazing. I just love hearing that because, you know, especially today, I hate to say anything about our political world that we're living in, but it is so white men out there. Not, and it seems like we as women have more and more restraints being put on us. And I love seeing women that experience and practice their freedom. So that's one thing that really is inspiring.
So I gotta admit, that's one of the reasons I don't have international plans right now. I do want to wait and see what the climate is. I also want to make sure that, Valerie, that you and I acknowledge our white privilege as well, because some people are not able to travel, not just because they don't want to or they're nervous, but because they are not going to be treated as well or they're not going to be welcomed as well. So when I talk about travel or when I do travel consulting for people that aren't comfortable traveling alone and I work with them ahead of time, I make sure to let them know that what works for me may not work for somebody else, and it might not be because of one certain reason. It might be something I don't even understand or I haven't experienced before. So I really think the world would be a much beautifuler place if anybody could travel anywhere whenever they wanted to, regardless of gender, regardless of age, regardless of race or ability. And it's tough for some people to travel if they have disability aids that have to accompany them, or if they're hard of hearing and they can't hear all this stuff going on in an airport or such, or if they're being targeted or marginalized at all. So when we talk travel and when I talk about that, I really want people to know that different people have different limitations on why they can't go. Maybe it is because of their criminal record, or maybe it's even because they've been victimized when they've been out of their house. And so they don't even want to go far from their home, let alone go to another city, a state, a different country.
You made some wonderful points there because there are a lot of different reasons that keep people from being able to travel. And if you're not marginalized, you don't usually think about those things. And, we are very privileged in the way that we are able to move freely from here to there, at least right now. So now I would like to talk a little bit about your reentry work. I'm really interested in the reunification work that you do. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I started working in the criminal justice world, so to speak, gosh, almost 22 years ago. It's time flies, guys, time flies. And when I started, it was mostly with kids, youth that had gotten in trouble with the court system. They've gotten in trouble at school, suspended, possibly expelled. And it was really focusing on the kid that did the crime or the harm and the person that they victimized. And through some of that, we started seeing those family dynamics that happen when somebody gets in trouble, when they are on paper, when they're having people be in chasing them and looking over their shoulder, or they have probation or parole restrictions. And it changes the family dynamic. It can make a big impact on that. And sometimes the family is actually the victim of the crime. And so that changes that whole dynamic as well. So when we say the word family reunification, it could mean a whole bunch of things to different people. Sometimes it is talking about the behaviors and maybe the crime that happened to prevent them from all being together, or from them being separated through a jail or through a prison sentencing. Sometimes it could be the youth that's removed from the house for long-term placement, residential treatment. So that sometimes it really focuses on what do they need to talk about that's already happened so that it doesn't happen again. And sometimes family reunification means we need to just forget about the past. We need to look at the future. What is it going to look like when you come home? Because if you're going to be sentenced for 14 years and I still want to stay in a relationship with you, or maybe I'm your mom or your granny and I want to be involved with you and you may come back and live with me when you get out of incarceration, what is that dynamic going to look like? Because when you were 4 or 14 years younger, we had this kind of a relationship. Now you've been in a different environment. I've been growing on myself on the way out. What is it going to be looking like? So many people are so excited that, oh my gosh, my loved one's coming back. I've missed them. They've been incarcerated for so long. And then reality hits and the person inside grows differently than the person outside. And when they come together, if they haven't talked about all the ick, like who's doing the laundry? What's going to happen if you hear really loud noises and we're in the supermarket and you have hard time responding to that? What if your parole agent just randomly pops in the middle of the night? What if I have alcohol in the house and that's an absolute no-no for your parole? Or what if there's kids in the house that I didn't realize? We need to talk about that way ahead of time. So when we talk about family reunification, it looks different on everybody. Sometimes it might be that the person that's been incarcerated hasn't had any contact with their kids prior to even going to prison or jail. And then they get out and they start thinking about it, or they're getting ready to get out and they're like, wow, I'm ready to be a dad. I'm ready to be a mom. I wonder if they'll let me see my child, or I wonder if my child will want to see me. Sometimes we will work just with that person before we even talk to the other family members to see if they're ready for them. Like, what is it going to look like for you if, number one, they say, yes, I want to start seeing you, or number two, I don't want you in my life. You weren't there for the last 8 years. Why would I want you now? So we want to make sure that the individual getting ready to hopefully unify is in a good space, but we also want to make sure that the family understands what that dynamic is going to possibly change for them when the individual gets home, or when they maybe start seeing them without having the cameras at the check-in facility or the visitation room being on. They're not on anymore. What is that going to look like? It's different.
So do you have an organization or foundation?
So a couple things. So I run a nonprofit in my area, and we used to go into the prisons and we would work with individuals that were fathers that were going to be getting out within about anywhere from a month to 3 months. We did that for about 5 years. And then when they get out of prison, or if they were coming from a prison that was farther away, they would come work with us once they got out. And then we would decide, is it appropriate to reach out to the victim of your crime? Is it appropriate to reach out to the mother of your children, or your possible spouse, or your parents that you're going to be living with? So that was a very optionable program. So it wasn't necessarily mandated or a parole condition. It was a parole encouragement, because unfortunately so many people do get parole or probation violations because of their partners, because they get mad or they see you talking to somebody else or something like that. And so we really tried to mitigate that. We tried to work through it before it happened or before it escalated too much. So our office is still able to do that for people that are local to us if people reach out to us and they want that service. Now, I have a side business called Home Reentry Services that I'm available to work with the family, because sometimes families, they don't know what to say when they get that phone call. They don't know what to write in a letter. They don't know how to talk to their loved one when their loved one's incarcerated, because they feel guilt, or they don't want to let you know how happy they are, or they don't want to put any more stress on you or make you sad. And that happens with those that are incarcerated. They might tell this much of what's really going on behind the prison walls. And so you guys aren't really communicating at the right time. So I can work with families of those that are incarcerated at any time, from any organization, any state, anywhere. And then I can also work with agents or reentry professionals or agencies or community members that are trying to offer supportive solutions when people do come back. So whether it's through a mediation, our family reunification discussion, if it's through some family planning, that's all stuff I can also do on my side business, you could say.
Yeah, I think a lot of families, they don't know what to do when people come home. And unfortunately, some of the things that we used to do for our loved ones before they went in could be the exact opposite of what we should be doing, especially overstimulation, whether it's sound or smell or lights, so much of that can be, affect people. The other thing I wish we had was reentry for families,
Yes.
because if we had some good guidelines for the families when people come home, especially dealing with PTSD or PICS, with the post-incarceration syndrome, it's really something that needs to be understood by the people that are going to be in their lives, because their behaviors may not be quite what you expect.
Yeah. And even if that loved one wants to act the exact way you want them to, reality is going to hit, and new challenges are going to happen. And I mean, life happens even if there's no separation of partners, or if there's no separation in a grown child coming back to live with their parent. If there was nothing criminal involved, it's still difficult and tough. And I think so many times people that are going back into the community after incarceration, they don't want to think that anything bad's going to happen because they're ready, they've done their time, and they should just walk out and have great things. And unfortunately, life's still life's, even for those of us not incarcerated. And then when it happens, it kind of becomes this whirlwind dynamic that just can get out of control very quickly if you're not prepared for some of those road bumps that are going to happen. And some of the families, this is one of the saddest things, some of the families want that incarcerated individual, when they get out, to do the same stuff they did before they got caught. And it's like, just do better, don't get caught this time, but we need that money, we need you to hustle, we need you to do that kind of stuff. And that's so unfair in so many ways, but it is one of those dynamics that it can be something we can work on, but people have to trust. And you talked about families having reentry. That's the most perfect world scenario, but so many times parents and spouses or partners or even kids that are going to have their dad or mom coming back, they don't want to talk about the ick. They want to only talk about being happy, or they don't think it's going to be that big of a deal because they love this human. Everything's going to be great, right? And then, like you said, some of these major intense life and mental, I don't want to say mental illness, I want to say mental stresses that happen to those that are incarcerated, that don't happen to those of us that can walk out of a door anytime we want to. It's a different reality, and that just needs to be talked about. And then safety planning can be made, and then things become so much easier when something might get thrown at either of them.
That's why I love these conversations, because the more that we learn, and the only way we learn is by talking to other people, and if we can talk with people who have experiences and have been through this, it gives us better insight on how to help those that we love.
Yes. So I grew up
So,
with a dad that had PTSD from the war. So it was very intense. And then when I was in first grade, he got a severe medical issue where he was not able to ever work again. And he had intense pain my entire life. And watching him struggle both physically and mentally, I knew there had to be more for other people, that people shouldn't have to have this kind of stress in their families. But we were also told what happened in the house stayed in the house. You didn't talk about what's going on. You don't talk about dad when he's taken too much medication. You don't talk about dad when there's an ambulance coming to take him to the hospital. You don't share that business. And what happens is you grow up thinking you can't talk about the ick and that you're the only one experiencing this. And I tell you, we're all experiencing life. We all have ick from our families and from our relationships and from sometimes our jobs and the decisions we make. And the more we can talk about it, it doesn't make it go away, but it becomes a little bit more normalized, and it becomes a little easier to work through, because then you're going to hear people say, oh my gosh, that happened to me when I was a kid, or my dad had some of that, or my mom did that, or I wondered what was going on at my cousin's house when the uncle came back from this or that. And it makes it easier to learn and grow and not have all that extra stress just hanging on your shoulders, for sure.
I love that you bring that up because we don't like to talk about the things that aren't good. But if you grow up in a household that has anything going on, whether it's addictions or illness, or you are told that that's private business and we don't talk about it. And unfortunately, as you grow into an adult, you end up stuffing stuff. And that's where a lot of people's addiction issues come in, or anger issues, because you can't express yourself, or you don't know how to express yourself in a healthy manner. So I want to ask you, how did you happen to go into this work?
I didn't volunteer for it, I'll tell you that. So I was in my internship for my Master's of Social Work program, and I thought I was going to work with little kids at schools, trying to make them happy when they were sad. That's what my idea of going into social work was. And I got that internship. I was housed in two elementary schools, and I was so excited. And then about a month and a half into my internship, my supervisor said, hey, we just heard about this new thing with juvenile court called restorative justice, where you work with the kid that did something wrong and you talk to their victim and you get them to work together, and now you need to start doing that, so you're going to work with the criminals now. And I'm like, oh no, what do I know about criminals? I've been a victim of crime and I want to help little kids. I don't know criminals. That's not my life. And he's like, oh, we'll help you through it, it'll be fine. So I wasn't like scared to do it. It just wasn't my excitement. It wasn't my passion. And I tell you, by the first or second kid, I was just like, now I know why I'm doing this work. And then from working with the youth, we started doing all these really innovative programs to keep kids in school and to keep kids having less, not only incarceration, but reduced sentences through probation, so that they were getting the words and the tools and the support they needed, instead of just, oh, you're going to be on tether or be locked up and just don't do it again. We were really talking about, why did you even do this, and what do you need to learn so it doesn't happen again. When they started seeing that success, then we started going up the line with adult cases and more intense juvenile cases. And then years later, then Michigan developed what they called the Michigan Prisoner Reentry Initiative, and that got us into the prison systems. Because along the lines with those little kids, I also said I never wanted to work with adults, because adults are already jaded. They're never going to heal right. They're already messed up. Oh boy, I tell you, the people I met in prison and when they got out of prison, like literally, I'm like, I don't know one of them, Valerie. I don't know one of them. And I'm talking thousands, mostly men. I've worked with some women, but mostly men. I don't know one man that has told me that, I mean, there's a couple, but they always said, I wish I would have done things differently as a kid, and then I wouldn't have made the choices I'm making now. So sometimes it's not that they made criminal decisions as a youth, but maybe they didn't find a safety network. Maybe they were following the wrong crowd. Maybe they were angry at their family. Maybe they started using things like cigarettes or cannabis or alcohol when it wasn't legal for them, and it changed not just their coping mechanisms and their body. I'm willing to do this wrong, even though I think I can because I'm cool, I'm a teenager. I can't, I'm going to tell those adults to whatever, I can do it myself. You're still breaking a law. So you're letting yourself know that, I don't have to follow rules. And when you start doing that enough as a youth, it becomes a little easier as an adult to do things that you never probably thought you would have done when you were much younger. So I've learned so much from the adults. I love it. It's heartbreaking 99% of the time, and it is rewarding 99% of the time. That 1%, I don't know what the heck's going on usually, Valerie.
I really love that you say that it is both heartbreaking and so rewarding. Because when I started doing this work, it was back in 1997. Hard to believe. But anyways,
Not much before me,
I
girl.
and I chose to only work in Maine because Maine didn't have a death penalty. And so I never ever thought I would be dealing with anybody from death row. And I said, there's no way I'm ever going to. But when I started doing the podcast, the very first letter, guess where it came from? The row. Now, almost 4 years later, I have multiple people that are on the row that I talk to and I write to. And also, a miracle happened because four of the men I was working with just came off the row in December.
That is amazing, Valerie.
Before Governor Cooper left in North Carolina, he reduced their sentences to life without parole. And I believe there's a couple of them that actually even are going to have the possibility of parole. And a lot of it was through the Racial Justice Act. As we know, the disparities between races and sentencing is just terrible. Let's see. I had a couple other things. Is there anything we have not covered that you want to talk about?
Oh, I could talk for hours on everything, Valerie. I think it's really important that we really, as both people that are working with people that have had rough lifestyles, whether it's by choice or by upbringing, and the people that have been victimized by some of those people's choices, whether they're a family member or they're a stranger that was victimized, that we figure out what works for us to work through that. Because Just like somebody that's been incarcerated, that's done something, even if it was a very horrendous crime, you don't have to be that individual the rest of your life. You can grow. You don't have to be defined by that. Unless you have something going on cognitively in your brain that just can't be switched in a different capacity. But the same thing with those that have been victimized and those that are family members. If you are so focused on what happened because of that intensity and that stress, and I'm not trying to minimize what happened, believe me, but if that's your biggest focus in the world, it's going to limit you. It's going to hold you back in so many capacities. So keep looking for what works for you to get out of that cycle of anger and depression and anxiety to try to move forward. There are amazing professionals out there that want to help you through some of the PTSD and through some of this anxiety. And there are some people that just aren't going to connect with you. So if you try one therapist, one doctor, one psychiatrist, and it's not a good fit, you try one kind of medication or one kind of mindfulness practice, and it does nothing for you, keep trying, okay? There are, Valerie and I connected right away, but if I was her person, she was my person, and she kind of like treated me like, I don't want to get to know you, or I'm better than you, why would that be a good fit? So we would keep trying. We'd be like, yeah, we're not going to talk. We're not going to do stuff together. You need to do what works for you, because what might work for Valerie to help her feel happy again and get through some of that intensity might not work for me at all. I might need to do something completely different. So if you've always kind of like calmed yourself down by being physically active, well, can you do that again? Or do you need to be somebody that has something that's very calm, like you're doing more of your breathing and meditation? Are you doing just intense stuff, or are you doing some creative stuff? Because if your brain is just focused on, I got to do this, I got to hustle, I got to do this, and you're not like drawing or writing or like imagining cool things, you're not utilizing all of the brain that wants to get stimulated to grow and to heal and to move forward. You don't deserve to be stuck there, even if you're physically stuck in prison or jail for who knows how long. You deserve to live a quality of life in the capacity you're in, and that's something that a lot of times people don't give themselves permission to be happy, either after they've done something wrong or they've had something bad that's happened to them. And so finding the right support network is huge. That's something that I want to make sure that we talk about, because so many times, especially men, don't realize the beauty of talking through what's happened to them. It's not going to make it go away, but it is going to normalize, and it's going to let your brain say, wow, I don't have to fixate on that quite as much as I always have, because now I put it out in there and it makes more sense, and now it wants to start healing and working through it. So our brains are beautiful things, guys. I mean, and there are so many intelligent humans that are locked behind walls, and some of that's intentional. Some of that is very intentional, because they know that you could change the world in so many ways if you were free. So I really want people to realize that it's not just because people are lazy or dumb or they don't care that's why they're in prison. There's so much more to all humans. We have to unlock what that is. We have to figure that out in a way that works for us. And if we're working in the field, whether we're a corrections guard, whether we're the judges, whether we're the parole board, the reentry workers, social workers, psychiatrists, we can't keep treating people like numbers and like they are their actual crime. We have to treat them as humans. We have to learn from them, and we have to be open to different opportunities for each person. Because like I said, it's not going to work the same for everybody. And sometimes there's just this cookie cutter mentality. There are some prisons that if you say, oh, I can go see a counselor, that counselor is going to have to report everything you said, and then that might impact your parole. Well, there's other counselors that they are going to absolutely help you and support you and keep that confidential and help you move through all that ick. So please don't think what's happened for one thing is going to be what's going to happen to you. Make sure that you look at that. And if you are one of the worker people, if you this was what was told to me right before I went into prison for the first time. This was told to me by a police officer friend. He said, Jackie, every person in prison deserves to be there. Why in the world would you go into a prison? You're a woman. You know what they're going to think, and you know what they're going to try to do to you. Okay, I went into prisons for 5 years, anywhere from 3 to 6 or 8 times a month, so I wasn't there every day. In 5 years, there were 2 men that made me feel a little uncomfortable. Nothing bad happened at all. I was locked in a room sometimes with 30 men. 2 people made me feel a little uncomfortable. Nothing bad happened. The mentality that he had by saying everybody deserves to be in prison if they're there, oh, it made me so mad. And that was before I did as much of the reentry work as I do now and realize how many people are innocent that are in prison, how many people got sent there just because they didn't release somebody else's name, or they got intense terms that somebody else would not have had that kind of an incarceration term. So don't be that person. Don't see that, because then you are becoming those people that not only are going to harm the people in those prisons in some capacity, but you are going to start hurting yourself, because you're going to start feeling guilty at some point in time by thinking that people are animals or that they deserve to be treated like that. You yourself as a worker person, you have to get through that, or you're going to burn out, you're going to feel guilty, and then you're going to self-sabotage. There's a reason that so many correction guards get divorced and have alcohol problems. It's sad, but it's reality. So take care of yourself, do what you need to do, and if you need to leave this profession, it's not for everybody. There's not everybody meant to be in certain roles. I can't go become a seamstress or a cook because I suck at those things, Go find something that works for you and brings you joy,
You brought up some really important things about the people who work in the system, because it's not a very glorious job as far as being a corrections officer. And there's some that are really good at what they do. There's others not so much. But we can learn from that. And as we progress further into the years, we can start training the officers differently. One thing I think we need to really bring in is empathy, because I know that I did a lot of messed up things in my young years. I could have been right there with some of them myself.
You're
You
right.
know, I hung out with some of the people I shouldn't have been hanging out with. That doesn't mean I was a terrible person. It just meant that I was trying to find my way and didn't make the best choices. And that's, with a lot of people. And some people, they're raised in it.
Yeah.
It's all you know. And until you know differently.
Yeah. So true.
So, Jackie, if people wanted to find out more about the work you're doing,
Mhm.
and maybe even, I don't want to say copy some of the things, but learn from some of the things that you've already experienced in the work you're doing, how can they find out more?
Yeah, so the easiest way to find me is you can see my name on the screen if it shows. You can find me through LinkedIn, or you can search LinkedIn for home reentry services. I don't have a website anymore. It's not what I like to jive on, you talked about that word copy. Now, I would love to work myself out of a job. I would love to not have to do this kind of work. I would love there to be no victimization. I'd love there to be no incarceration. There's a lot of work to be done, so please copy this work. But again, what Valerie said about having empathy, don't go into this line of work thinking you're just gonna scare these people into doing good choices and not breaking the law again. No, that's not what we need. We need people going into this field, and we need family members to learn and to be willing to listen and offer support so that people know there's other choices. So look for trainings. There's a lot of great trainings. Look for people that have lived experience and see how they're making a difference once they get out and they make choices that they want to give back to people that are still incarcerated, or people that might be making some not so great choices. There's a lot of opportunity. I would love to do, to teach you some of the skills I have. There's a lot of stuff to do. You can reach out and we can do virtual stuff. We can do in-person stuff depending on what that looks like, because if you're somebody that is wanting to do this work and you're a little intimidated, or you don't think you're going to do a good enough job, or you don't like the way that the administration is telling you to do your work, You're not alone, first of all. That happens to a lot of people. So the more you can have some support, or you can have a consultant like me to walk you through some of that and help you look at things maybe in a different way, the easier it can be for you. If you want this replicated in your community, that's stuff that I can do as well. I've been through the very beginning stages of a lot of these programmings and putting restorative justice practices or reentry practices into the field. We are the only, my day job is the only agency in the state, possibly nationwide, that does the jail reentry program that we do with those that have a felony conviction. And that we have people all day long saying, oh, that's great, but they don't ask us to replicate it for them. We could help you, and we could help you so you're not reinventing the wheel, but you're getting the success and the changes, because humans are coming back to your community that have been incarcerated. They deserve to be welcomed, and they deserve to be supported when they get back. And shame on the community if they don't realize that, because we are missing out on some great humans if we don't welcome them back in the way that they deserve to be welcomed back in a lot of capacities.
You made a really good point about the welcoming back, because we don't welcome our loved ones back. We do it with fear and anger, and you know, you don't know how to process those emotions. And it's because of what we see on television and what we hear from people who do work and say things like that they all belong there. But when those people who say they all belong there, I would like them to think just once, what if that was my son? What if that was my daughter, my mother? And see if you feel a little differently.
I love that. It could even be you. Like you said, Valerie, we've made decisions that were probably not always safe. We are all, every human, I don't care how rich you are, what country or you are in, you are one decision away from being locked up yourself. That it's just that plain and simple. In talking about welcoming back, I work with a lot of kiddos that are close to being expelled, or they are suspended, or maybe long-term suspended. Sometimes they've only been out of school for 2 days because of their behavior, and they will tell me about how their teachers treat them differently. They don't let them know, wow, that must have been tough for you, missing school for 2 days, 10 days, being out of school for a couple months. They treat them like they are not accepted anymore, that they don't like them. That's going to translate, so why would we do that to kids? Why would we do that to people coming out of incarceration? A lot of it is fear, but a lot of it is misguided fear, because like you said about the media, and because people don't want to get to know other humans. So my hope is that people just get to learn from each other to do better, to be more caring, and to know that life is meant to be happier and safer, and not meant to have all this ick attached to it. And if you're surrounded by ick, see what you can do to move to another area, whether it's physically or mentally, in another area where you're surrounding yourself with better things, so it gets a lot better for you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jackie. You have really been a great guest today, and I just love the idea of the work you're doing, and you're traveling. I just want to let you know that whenever I see your picture come on LinkedIn, it uplifts me, because you have this big, beautiful smile and that spark in your eye, and you share all the great stuff that's happening in life. I mean, as you say, the ick happens, but boy, to be able to share those experiences and for other people to be able to enjoy it with you it's a great thing.
I appreciate that. Now, it doesn't mean my world is perfect roses and butterflies all day, but I don't feel like other people should have to see my ick. I want to share all the good. And you do the same thing, Valerie. When I heard that you had started talking to people on death row, it really opened my eyes that somebody that said they never would, and now they are. Anything's possible, guys. And I mean, you and I have done things we never thought we would do, and we're better for it. And that's the challenge that I have for everybody watching this podcast, is to realize you deserve to do more than what you're doing now.
Well, I used to end the show with this: never give up on hope, because miracles happen every day. So until next time.
You have been listening to The Prison Pod, a podcast not just for those in prison but for anyone who has been affected by incarceration. Ms. Valerie would love for you to write to her with your questions, comments, and show ideas. The address is Prison Pod, Post Office Box 294, Orono, Maine. 04473.